She hadn't let go of her dress once, not even to write. Mrs. Patterson stood at the front of her third-grade classroom, watching the clock tick toward 3:15, and all she could think about was Emily Morrison's small fingers, white-knuckled, trembling, clutching the blue fabric of her dress like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. The other children were packing their backpacks, chattering about weekend plans, trading Pokemon cards in violation of the no-trading rule. Normal chaos, normal noise. But Emily sat frozen at her desk in the back row, her hands fisted in that dress, her face pale as winter. Mrs. Patterson had been teaching for 17 years. She'd seen stomach bugs and anxiety attacks, friendship drama and family troubles. She'd seen children hide bruises under long sleeves in May. She'd seen the careful way some kids moved, like their bodies were made of glass. This was different. This was something that made her chest tight with a fear she couldn't name yet. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Let's go back to that morning. Emily Morrison arrived at Riverside Elementary at 7:45, same as always. Her mother dropped her off at the curb. Mrs. Patterson saw it happen from the classroom window, where she was setting up the day's science experiment. Nothing unusual. The silver sedan, the quick wave, Emily climbing out with her pink backpack. Except Emily didn't bounce up the steps like she normally did. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone walking on ice. Mrs. Patterson noticed, but she didn't think much of it. Not yet. Emily was usually the first one to burst through the classroom door, the first one to ask what they were doing today, the first one to volunteer for every activity. She was the girl who brought in tadpoles she'd caught in the creek behind her house. The girl who wrote stories about dragons and princesses that were always 7 pages long, front and back, because she had too many ideas to fit on less. The girl who laughed so hard at lunch that milk came out her nose once, and instead of being embarrassed, she'd laughed even harder. That morning, Emily slipped into the classroom like a ghost. She didn't make eye contact, didn't say good morning. Just moved to her desk, the one by the window with the butterfly stickers she'd decorated it with back in September, and sat down with a care that seemed almost surgical. Mrs. Patterson was writing the day's agenda on the board, her back to the class, but she heard the absence of Emily's voice in the usual morning chatter. She turned around. Emily was sitting rigid in her chair, both hands gripping the sides of her dress. The dress was nothing special, light blue with small white flowers, the kind you'd find at Target or Old Navy. Modest, appropriate, a little worn at the hem. But the way Emily held it, you'd think it was made of gold, or maybe like it was the only thing protecting her from something terrible. "Good morning, Emily," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice warm but probing. Emily's eyes flickered up for just a second. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson." The voice was quiet, too quiet. Emily's voice was never quiet. It was the voice that asked 1,000 questions during every lesson, the voice that sang too loud during music class, the voice that could be heard clear across the playground when she called for her friends to come play. Mrs. Patterson felt the first whisper of wrongness, but she pushed it down. Maybe Emily was tired. Maybe she'd had a bad morning at home. Kids had off days. That was normal, except as the morning went on, nothing got better. During morning meeting, when they sat in a circle on the carpet and shared their weekend stories, Emily stayed in her desk. "I don't feel like sitting on the floor today," she said when Mrs. Patterson asked. Her hands never left her dress. During math, when they worked on multiplication tables, Emily wrote with her right hand but kept her left hand pressed against her lap, holding that fabric. Her handwriting, usually loopy and enthusiastic, was shaky. During reading time, when the other children sprawled on beanbags and floor cushions with their books, Emily remained at her desk. She held her book with one hand, a Magic Tree House book she'd been excited about on Friday. But her eyes weren't moving across the pages. They were fixed, staring somewhere far away. By lunchtime, Mrs. Patterson's concern had grown teeth. She watched Emily move through the lunch line, watched her take a tray, watched her accept the pizza slice and the fruit cup, watched her walk to the table where she always sat with her friends, Mia and Jasmine. But the walking was wrong. Emily moved like every step hurt, like she was carrying something fragile inside her that might break if she moved too fast. Mrs. Patterson wasn't the only one who noticed. "Mrs. Patterson, is Emily okay?" Mia asked, tugging on her sleeve during lunch duty. "She won't talk to us. She won't even look at us." "I'll check on her, sweetie. Don't worry." But Mrs. Patterson was worried. More than worried. There was a cold feeling spreading through her stomach, the kind of feeling she'd learned to trust over 17 years of working with children, the kind of feeling that said something was very, very wrong. She approached Emily's table, crouched down beside her so they were at eye level. "Emily, honey, how are you feeling today?" Emily's fingers tightened on her dress. "I'm fine." "You seem uncomfortable. Does something hurt?" "No. Too fast. Too defensive." "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you, if you're not feeling well, if something happened..." "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. I just want to eat my lunch." But Emily wasn't eating her lunch. The pizza sat untouched, the fruit cup unopened. She was just sitting there, hands in her lap, holding that dress, staring at nothing. Mrs. Patterson straightened up. Her mind was racing. The training she'd received, the mandatory safeguarding training all teachers went through, was coming back to her in fragments. Changes in behavior, physical discomfort, withdrawal from friends, reluctance to be touched, careful movement. She thought about Emily's mother that morning. The quick drop-off. Had there been something off about it? Something rushed? Or was she reading into things that weren't there? The afternoon was worse. During science, when they were supposed to be working in groups to build simple machines with household items, Emily refused to leave her desk. "I'll just watch," she said. Mrs. Patterson didn't push. She was too busy watching the way Emily winced when she shifted in her chair, the way she closed her eyes for just a second, like she was gathering strength against pain. During art, Emily didn't pick up her paintbrush. She just sat there, hands on her dress, staring at the blank paper in front of her. And then, at 2:30, during silent reading time, it happened. Mrs. Patterson was at her desk, grading spelling tests, when she heard a small sound, a catch in breathing. She looked up. Emily was crying, not sobbing, not making noise, just silent tears streaming down her face, her whole body shaking with the effort of keeping quiet. Mrs. Patterson was out of her chair in seconds. "Emily," she kept her voice gentle, approaching slowly. "Emily, sweetie, what's wrong?" Emily's head snapped up. She wiped at her face frantically. "Nothing. I'm fine, I'm fine." "You're crying." I just got sad about my book. The dog dies." Mrs. Patterson glanced at the book, Charlotte's Web. She'd taught this class long enough to know the emotional beats of that story. They weren't at the sad part yet. "Emily, I need you to be honest with me. Are you hurt? Did something happen to you?" For just a moment, just one heartbreaking moment, Emily's face crumpled. Her mouth opened like she was going to speak, going to tell the truth, going to ask for help. But then something else took over. Fear. Pure fear. She shook her head violently. "No, nothing happened. I'm just tired. Can I please just read my book?" Mrs. Patterson wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but she also knew that pushing a frightened child could make them shut down completely. She nodded slowly. Okay, but I'm here if you need to talk. About anything. Emily didn't respond, just looked back down at her book, her hands returning to that dress, holding it like a lifeline. Mrs. Patterson returned to her desk, but she wasn't grading anymore. She was thinking. She was remembering. She was adding up all the small signs, all the red flags, all the moments that didn't make sense. And she was making a decision. At 3 o'clock, when the bell rang and the other children flooded out of the classroom in their usual stampede of noise and energy, Emily stayed seated. She waited until the room was nearly empty before she stood up, slowly, carefully, that same painful movement Mrs. Patterson had been watching all day. Emily, can you stay for just a minute? I want to talk to you about something. Emily froze. Her eyes went wide. I have to go. My mom is waiting. I'll write you a note. It'll just take a minute. I really have to go. There was panic in her voice now. Real panic. Mrs. Patterson felt her own heart rate spike. Emily, please, just 1 minute. But Emily was already moving toward the door, clutching her dress, moving as fast as her careful steps would allow. Mrs. Patterson stood in the empty classroom, listening to Emily's footsteps fade down the hallway, and felt something inside her chest crack open. This wasn't just concern anymore. This was certainty. Something was desperately wrong, and that little girl was suffering in a way she couldn't articulate, in a way she was too frightened to name. She looked at the clock. 3:05. She had maybe 10 minutes before the school would empty out for the day, before the administrators left their offices, before the opportunity to do something slipped through her fingers like water. Mrs. Patterson grabbed her phone and walked quickly down the hallway toward the main office. Her mind was a storm of thoughts, each one more urgent than the last. What if she was wrong? What if she was overreacting? What if Emily's parents were furious with her for raising false alarms? But underneath all those doubts was a louder voice, the voice of 17 years of experience, the voice of every training session she'd ever attended. Better to be wrong and embarrassed than to be right and silent. The main office was quiet. Mrs. Henderson, the school secretary, was packing up her desk. Principal Davies was in his office, visible through the glass window, typing something on his computer. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Henderson said, looking up with a smile. Heading out? I need to speak with Principal Davies. It's urgent. The smile faded. Mrs. Henderson picked up the phone. Let me see if he's available. Tell him it's about a safeguarding concern. Those words changed everything. Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted immediately from casual to serious. She spoke quickly into the phone, then nodded. Go right in. Principal Davies was already standing when Mrs. Patterson entered his office. He was a tall man in his 50s, former military, with the kind of calm authority that made crisis situations feel manageable. What's going on? Mrs. Patterson closed the door behind her. It's Emily Morrison, 3rd grade. I think something is very wrong. She laid it all out. The clutching of the dress, the refusal to sit normally, the careful, painful movement, the withdrawal from friends, the fear in her eyes when asked simple questions, the crying she tried to hide, the panic when asked to stay after class. Principal Davies listened without interrupting, his expression growing more grave with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, thinking. You're right to bring this to me, he said finally. This needs to be addressed immediately, but we need to follow protocol exactly. I'm going to call Mrs. Chen. Mrs. Chen was the school counselor. We're going to need to speak with Emily before she leaves. Do you know if she's still in the building? She left the classroom about 5 minutes ago. She said her mother was waiting. Principal Davies was already reaching for his phone. Mrs. Henderson, is Emily Morrison still in the building? Check the carpool line. A pause. Good. Bring her to Mrs. Chen's office immediately. Tell her mother there's been a small incident we need to discuss with Emily first. Nothing serious, just routine. Don't let the mother leave." He hung up and looked at Mrs. Patterson. "This is the part where we have to be very careful. If there is abuse or neglect happening, we need to document everything properly. We need to give Emily a chance to tell us what's happening without pressure, without leading questions. And we need to be prepared for this to go in several different directions." "What if I'm wrong?" Mrs. Patterson heard herself say. "What if this is all in my head?" "Then we apologize and everyone goes home." "But if you're right?" He shook his head. "Then we may have just saved that child's life." Mrs. Chen's office was small and warm, decorated with soft colors and comfortable chairs. Mrs. Chen herself was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that put children at ease. She'd been briefed quickly by Principal Davies and was ready when Emily was brought in. Mrs. Patterson watched through the one-way glass from the adjacent observation room. It was policy. Any conversation with a child about potential abuse had to be witnessed and documented. Principal Davies stood beside her, arms crossed, watching intently. Emily entered the office looking terrified. Her hands were still clutching her dress. Mrs. Chen smiled warmly. "Hi, Emily. I'm Mrs. Chen. We haven't met yet, but I've heard wonderful things about you from Mrs. Patterson. She says you're one of the brightest students she's ever had." Emily didn't respond, just stood there looking at the floor. "Why don't you have a seat? You're not in any trouble. I just wanted to check in with you because Mrs. Patterson is worried about you. She says you haven't seemed like yourself today." Slowly, painfully, Emily lowered herself into the chair. The movement made Mrs. Patterson's breath catch. The girl was moving like someone who'd been injured, like every motion caused pain. "Emily, I want you to know that anything you tell me stays between us, unless you're in danger. My job is to help kids who are having a hard time. That's all. Just to help. Do you understand?" Emily nodded, still not making eye contact. "Mrs. Patterson noticed you've been holding your dress all day. She noticed you seem uncomfortable. She noticed you didn't want to sit on the floor during morning meeting. Can you tell me why?" Silence. Long, stretching silence. Mrs. Patterson could see Emily's hands tightening on the fabric, knuckles going white. "Did something happen at home, Emily? Did someone hurt you?" "No." The word came out sharp, defensive. "Nothing happened." "Okay, that's okay, but you seem like you're in pain. Are you hurting somewhere?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. She bit her lip, clearly fighting to hold them back. Mrs. Chen's voice got even softer. "Sweetie, if you're hurt, we can help you. But we need to know what's wrong. We need you to tell us the truth." "I'm not hurt." But Emily's voice cracked on the words. I don't feel good." "What doesn't feel good? Your stomach? Your head?" Emily shook her head. "Somewhere else." A tiny nod. "Can you show me where?" Emily's hands moved slightly, pressing against her lap, still holding that dress. And then, in a voice so small it was barely audible, she whispered, "It hurts to sit down. It hurts to walk. Everything hurts." Mrs. Patterson felt tears spring to her own eyes. Principal Davies put a hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Chen leaned forward slightly. "Emily, I need to ask you something important. This might feel embarrassing, but I need you to be brave and honest with me. Did someone touch you in a way that felt wrong? In your private areas?" "No." Emily's head shot up, eyes wide with genuine surprise. "No, nothing like that. Nobody touched me. I promise." Mrs. Chen nodded. "Okay, I believe you. But something is causing you pain, and we need to figure out what it is so we can help you feel better. Would it be okay if the school nurse came in, just to check and make sure you're not sick or injured?" Emily's face went pale. "I don't want anyone to see." "See what, honey?" "I don't want anyone to know." No what? But Emily was crying now, really crying, her whole body shaking. I can't tell. I'll get in trouble. Everyone will be mad at me. Mrs. Chen moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. Emily, listen to me. You will not get in trouble. I promise you that. Whatever is happening, whatever you need to tell us, you are safe here. No one is going to be angry with you. My mom said not to tell anyone. She said it was embarrassing. She said it would get better on its own. And there it was, the first crack in the wall. Mrs. Patterson felt her stomach drop. Principal Davies pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly, documenting, she realized, getting everything on record. Mrs. Chen's expression didn't change, but Mrs. Patterson could see the tension in her shoulders. Your mom said not to tell anyone about what? Emily was sobbing now, the words coming out between gasps. It started hurting on Friday, just a little bit. And then on Saturday it got worse. And Sunday I couldn't sit right anymore. And Monday morning I woke up and it was bleeding. What was bleeding, Emily? Down there, not like pee, like blood. And it hurt so much. I told my mom and she looked and she said it was just a rash. She said it would go away. She put some cream on it and told me not to touch it and not to tell anyone because it was private and embarrassing. Mrs. Chen's voice remained calm, professional, but Mrs. Patterson could hear the urgency underneath. Emily, this is very important. I need you to let the nurse look at you. This doesn't sound like just a rash. This sounds like something that needs a doctor. But my mom said, I know what your mom said. But your mom isn't a doctor, and sometimes parents make mistakes because they're scared or don't understand how serious something is. This could be an infection. It could be something that gets much worse if we don't treat it. Do you understand? Emily nodded, still crying. I'm going to call the nurse now. Her name is Ms. Rodriguez, and she's very kind. She's going to look and see what's happening, and then we're going to make sure you get the help you need. Okay? Okay. Mrs. Chen stepped out into the hallway, pulling out her phone. Mrs. Patterson could hear her voice, clipped and professional. We need Ms. Rodriguez in my office immediately. Potential medical emergency. And call 911. Tell them we may need paramedics for a pediatric patient with signs of infection or injury. Principal Davies turned to Mrs. Patterson. You need to go back to your classroom. Document everything you observed today. Exact times, exact behaviors, everything Emily said or did. Write it down now while it's fresh. I want to stay with her. I know, but the best thing you can do for her right now is make sure we have a clear record of everything. This is going to become a CPS case, possibly a medical neglect case. We need documentation. Mrs. Patterson nodded, wiping her eyes. She took one last look at Emily through the glass. The little girl was curled up in the chair now, still holding her dress, still crying, and then she walked back to her classroom. Her hands were shaking as she opened her laptop. She started typing. The date, the time, every single thing she'd noticed from the moment Emily walked into the classroom that morning. The way she moved, the things she said, the things she didn't say, the fear in her eyes, the pain in her movements. She was still typing when she heard the sirens. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. Mrs. Patterson could hear the commotion in the hallway, urgent voices, quick footsteps, the crackle of radio communication. She wanted to go out there, wanted to see what was happening, but she forced herself to stay at her desk and keep documenting. 20 minutes after that, Principal Davies appeared in her doorway. His face was grim. The paramedics took her to County General. Ms. Rodriguez did a preliminary check. She wouldn't give me details, patient privacy, but she said it was bad enough that Emily needed immediate medical attention. The mother is furious. She's threatening to sue the school. She's saying we had no right to examine her daughter without permission. Did they call CPS? Already done. There's going to be an investigation. The paramedics are mandatory reporters, and what they saw was apparently enough to trigger an immediate report. Mrs. Patterson felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. What did they see? Principal Davies shook his head. They wouldn't tell me specifics. Medical privacy laws. But one of the paramedics pulled me aside before they left and said, he paused, his jaw tight. He said if we'd waited another day or two, Emily might have ended up septic. He said whatever this infection is, it's serious. Really serious. Mrs. Patterson put her face in her hands. All day. Emily had been suffering all day, maybe longer, and she'd been trained to hide it, trained to stay quiet, trained to believe that her pain was embarrassing, something to be ashamed of, something that would get her in trouble if anyone found out. What happens now? She asked. Now we wait. CPS will interview the mother. They'll talk to the doctors. They'll determine whether this was genuine ignorance or negligence. Either way, Emily's getting the medical care she needs. You did the right thing. You trusted your instincts. But Mrs. Patterson didn't feel like she'd done the right thing. She felt like she'd failed. Failed to notice sooner. Failed to push harder, failed to break through Emily's fear fast enough. I should have checked earlier, at lunch when she wouldn't eat, or right after morning meeting when she refused to sit on the carpet. I wasted hours. You followed protocol, Principal Davies said firmly. You observed, you documented, you reported. You did everything exactly right, and because of that, Emily is going to be okay. But Mrs. Patterson wasn't sure she believed that. Not yet. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Mrs. Patterson finished her documentation, sent it to Principal Davies, and then sat in her empty classroom staring at Emily's desk by the window. The butterfly stickers seemed to mock her. All that brightness and hope, and underneath it, a child had been drowning in pain and fear. She thought about Emily's mother, the woman she'd seen dozens of times at pickup, at parent-teacher conferences, at school events. A perfectly normal mother, or so it seemed. Always on time, always polite, always asking appropriate questions about Emily's progress. What had she been thinking? How could she look at her child bleeding and in pain and decide it was just a rash? How could she tell Emily to stay quiet, to hide it, to be embarrassed? Mrs. Patterson wanted to be angry. Part of her was angry, but another part, the part that had been teaching long enough to see the full complexity of human behavior, wondered if Emily's mother had been scared. Scared of doctors, scared of bills, scared of judgment. Poverty did strange things to people's decisions. So did shame. So did growing up in families where you learned that asking for help was weakness, where you learned to handle everything yourself, no matter the cost. Or maybe it was darker than that. Maybe it was control. Maybe it was genuine neglect. Mrs. Patterson didn't know, and it wasn't her job to know. Her job had been to notice, to care, to speak up, and she had done that. She drove home that evening in a daze, her mind replaying the day over and over. Every moment she could have acted sooner, every sign she'd seen and rationalized away. Every time Emily had been screaming for help in the only way she knew how, and Mrs. Patterson had almost missed it. That night, she couldn't eat dinner, couldn't focus on the television her husband had turned on. She just sat on the couch, staring at nothing, thinking about a little girl in a hospital bed. Her phone rang at 8:30. Principal Davies. I thought you'd want to know. I just heard from the hospital. Emily has a severe urinary tract infection that had progressed to a kidney infection. If it had gone untreated much longer, it could have caused permanent kidney damage or sepsis. They've got her on IV antibiotics. She's going to need to stay in the hospital for a few days, but the doctors say she's going to recover fully. Mrs. Patterson felt something loosen in her chest. Thank God. The CPS investigator talked to the mother. Apparently, Emily's been complaining of pain when urinating for almost a week. The mother thought it was just dehydration, told her to drink more water. When the bleeding started, she got scared but convinced herself it would pass. She didn't want to take Emily to the doctor because they don't have insurance and she was worried about the cost. So it was financial? Partially. But there's more. The investigator said the mother has a history of medical neglect with herself, avoids doctors, doesn't trust them, relies on home remedies. She passed that mindset on to Emily, taught her that bodies hurt sometimes and you just push through it, that doctors are for emergencies only, and this didn't seem like an emergency to her until it was almost too late. Mrs. Patterson felt tears running down her face. Is Emily going to be taken away from her? No. The mother is genuinely remorseful. She didn't understand how serious it was. CPS is going to require medical neglect education classes, regular check-ins, and they're connecting the family with resources to get Emily on insurance. But Emily gets to go home once she's medically cleared. The mother made a terrible mistake, but it wasn't malicious. Just ignorant and scared. Can I visit her? Emily, I mean, at the hospital. I'll get you the information. But Mrs. Patterson, take tonight to process this. You've been through something traumatic, too. After she hung up, Mrs. Patterson sat in the dark living room and let herself cry. Not just for Emily, but for all the children who suffered in silence, for all the pain that went unnoticed because kids learned to hide it so well, for all the adults who looked away because it was easier than getting involved. The next day, Friday, Mrs. Patterson went to the hospital after school. She brought Emily's homework, not because she expected her to do it, but because normalcy mattered. She brought the book Emily had been reading. She brought a card signed by all the students in the class. Emily's hospital room was small but bright. There were monitors beeping softly, an IV line running to her arm, but Emily was sitting up in bed, and there was color in her face again. Real color, not the grayish pallor from yesterday. Hi, Emily. Emily's face lit up. Mrs. Patterson, you came. Of course I came. How are you feeling? Better. The medicine makes the pain go away. It's like magic. Emily's smile faded a little. Are you mad at me? Mrs. Patterson sat down in the chair beside the bed. Mad at you, sweetie. Why would I be mad at you? Because I didn't tell you the truth. Because I lied when you asked if I was hurt. Oh, Emily. Mrs. Patterson took her hand gently. I'm not mad at you. I'm not even a little bit mad. You were scared. You thought you were protecting yourself and your mom. You were trying to do what you thought was right. That doesn't make me mad. That makes me sad that you felt like you had to carry all that pain by yourself. Emily's eyes filled with tears. It hurt so much. I didn't know it could hurt that much. And I was so scared because my mom said not to tell anyone. And I thought, if I told, she'd get in trouble and it would be my fault. None of this is your fault. Not one single bit. You're a kid. You're supposed to be able to trust the adults around you to take care of you. Your mom made a mistake, a big one, but she loves you. She just didn't understand how sick you were, and now she's learning how to do better. The doctors said I could have died. Mrs. Patterson squeezed her hand. But you didn't. You're here and you're getting better, and you're going to be fine. Because you noticed. Emily's voice was small. Because you saw that something was wrong even when I tried to hide it. That's my job, sweetie, to notice, to care, to make sure you're safe. Emily was quiet for a moment, looking down at their joined hands. Mrs. Patterson, why did you check on me? I mean, really? Lots of kids have bad days. Why did you keep watching me? It was a good question. A profound question from an 8-year-old who just learned that her silence had almost killed her. Mrs. Patterson thought about how to answer. Because you weren't having a bad day. You were having a scared day. There's a difference. When kids have bad days, they get grumpy or sad or they act out. But when kids have scared days, they get quiet. They try to disappear. They hold themselves like they're made of glass. And I've been teaching long enough to know that quiet fear is the most dangerous thing in the world, because it means something is so wrong that a child doesn't feel safe asking for help. Emily absorbed this. How many other kids have you helped like this? A few, over the years. What happened to them? They got the help they needed, just like you. Emily nodded slowly. Then, surprising Mrs. Patterson completely, she said, I want to be a teacher when I grow up, like you, so I can notice when kids are scared. Mrs. Patterson felt her throat close up. I think you'd be an amazing teacher. They talked for a while longer, about school, about the book Emily was reading, about nothing and everything. Emily's mother came in halfway through, looking exhausted and ashamed. She thanked Mrs. Patterson quietly, her voice thick with emotion. Mrs. Patterson hugged her because sometimes adults who make terrible mistakes need someone to believe they can do better. Emily was discharged on Monday. She came back to school on Wednesday, moving carefully but without pain. The other children welcomed her back with homemade cards and drawings. During morning meeting, when they sat in their circle, Emily chose to sit on the carpet with everyone else. She didn't clutch her dress once. But there were changes, subtle ones that Mrs. Patterson noticed and documented carefully. Emily was quieter than she'd been before, more thoughtful. She asked different questions now, not just about science and math, but about bodies and health, and when it was okay to tell adults that something hurt. Mrs. Patterson used it as a teaching opportunity. She brought in a school nurse to talk to the class about listening to their bodies, about the difference between normal aches and serious pain, about how it was never embarrassing to ask for help when something was wrong. The lesson resonated with more children than Mrs. Patterson expected. 3 other kids came forward in the following weeks with concerns they'd been hiding, one with persistent headaches that turned out to be vision problems, one with stomach pain that was actually anxiety about bullying, one with a dental abscess that had been hurting for months. It was like Emily's story had opened a door, had given other children permission to speak up about their pain. The weeks turned into months. Emily slowly returned to her vibrant self, but there was a maturity to her now, a depth that hadn't been there before. She wrote a story for a creative writing assignment titled The Teacher Who Noticed, and Mrs. Patterson had to leave the room when she read it because she couldn't stop crying. The school updated its safeguarding policies. There were new training sessions on recognizing signs of medical neglect, on the difference between poverty-driven decisions and genuine abuse, on how to document concerns without judgment. Mrs. Patterson participated in all of them, sharing Emily's story with permission, hoping that other teachers might recognize similar signs before it was too late. She thought about Emily every single day, about how close they'd come to tragedy, about how easily she could have rationalized away her concerns, could have decided she was being paranoid, could have waited just one more day. One more day might have meant sepsis, might have meant organ failure, might have meant a memorial instead of a recovery. The guilt visited her at strange times. In the grocery store, she'd see a mother with a child and wonder what pain that child might be hiding. At staff meetings, she'd space out thinking about all the children she'd taught over the years, wondering if she'd missed signs in any of them. Her husband told her she needed to let it go, that she'd done everything right, but letting go felt like forgetting. And forgetting felt like betrayal. In March, 3 months after the incident, Mrs. Patterson had lunch duty again. She watched Emily on the playground, laughing with her friends, running without that careful, painful gait. The sight should have brought her relief. It did bring her relief, but it also brought something else, a fierce, protective love for all the children in her care, a bone-deep commitment to never look away, never dismiss, never assume that silence meant safety. That afternoon, during art class, Emily created something unusual. While the other children painted spring flowers and butterflies, Emily painted a portrait. It showed a woman with kind eyes standing in a classroom, and in front of her was a small girl in a blue dress. The girl's hands weren't clutching the dress anymore. They were reaching up, and the woman's hands were reaching down, connecting them. Emily titled it Being Seen. She gave it to Mrs. Patterson at the end of class, shy and proud at the same time. "I wanted you to have this, because you saw me when I didn't know how to ask." Mrs. Patterson hung it in her classroom, right next to her desk where she could see it every day. It became a reminder, not just of Emily, but of every child who needed someone to notice, someone to care, someone to act. The school year continued. Spring became summer. On the last day of school, Emily gave Mrs. Patterson a card. It was handmade, decorated with stickers and drawings. Inside, in Emily's careful handwriting, it said, "Thank you for saving my life. I will never forget you. Love, Emily." Mrs. Patterson read it 3 times before she could put it down. She added it to her collection of notes from students over the years, but this one felt different, heavier, more important. That summer, she thought about retirement. She was tired, worn down by years of emotional labor and bureaucratic frustration. But every time she seriously considered it, she thought about Emily, about the difference one observant adult could make, about how many other children might need someone to notice them, to care about them, to fight for them. She came back in September. Emily moved on to 4th grade, to a different teacher, a different classroom. But she visited Mrs. Patterson regularly, stopping by before school started, coming to help during lunch duty, volunteering to stay after class and organize supplies. She never said it explicitly, but Mrs. Patterson understood. Emily needed to maintain that connection, needed the reassurance that the adult who'd saved her was still there, still watching, still caring. And Mrs. Patterson was, not just for Emily, but for every child who walked into her classroom. She watched them with new intensity, looking for the signs she'd learned to recognize. The careful movement, the withdrawal, the fear hiding behind brave smiles. She documented everything. She asked questions. She trusted her instincts even when they made her uncomfortable. In October, she noticed a boy named Marcus who flinched whenever someone raised their voice. By November, after careful observation and documentation, she'd helped connect his family with domestic violence resources. In January, she noticed a girl named Sophia who wore the same clothes 3 days in a row and never brought lunch. Investigation revealed a family in crisis after a job loss, and the school was able to provide assistance before the situation became desperate. Each time Mrs. Patterson thought about Emily, about that blue dress and those white-knuckled hands, about how easy it would have been to look away. 2 years passed. Emily was in 5th grade now, preparing for middle school. She'd grown taller, more confident. She talked about becoming a pediatrician instead of a teacher. She wanted to help kids who were sick or hurt, wanted to be the kind of doctor who listened and believed and took pain seriously. Mrs. Patterson attended her 5th grade graduation ceremony, watched Emily walk across the stage to receive her certificate, watched her smile for photos with her mother, the mother who'd made a terrible mistake but had spent 2 years learning, growing, making sure Emily had regular checkups and knew it was always okay to speak up about pain. After the ceremony, Emily found Mrs. Patterson in the crowd. She hugged her tight, the kind of fierce hug that said more than words could. "I'm going to make you proud," Emily said. "You already have," Mrs. Patterson replied. She meant it. Not because Emily had gotten good grades or won awards, but because Emily had survived. because she'd learned that her voice mattered, that her pain was valid, that asking for help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. The following school year started with a new crop of third graders. 24 new faces, 24 new personalities, 24 new stories waiting to unfold. Mrs. Patterson looked at them on that first morning, some confident, some nervous, some clearly dealing with challenges she couldn't yet identify, and felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a familiar coat. She thought about Emily often during those first weeks, wondered if any of these new children were hiding pain, wondered which ones would need her to notice, to push past polite deflections, to trust her instincts even when it was uncomfortable. In the third week of school, she noticed a girl named Sophie who kept adjusting her shoes, wincing slightly with each step. Mrs. Patterson watched for a day, documenting. The next day, she quietly asked Sophie if her shoes were hurting her. Sophie admitted they were too small, had been for months, but her family couldn't afford new ones right now and she didn't want to complain. Mrs. Patterson connected the family with the school's clothing assistance program. Sophie had new shoes by the end of the week. It wasn't life-threatening like Emily's situation had been, but it mattered. Pain always mattered, whether it was life-threatening or just life-diminishing. These were the moments Mrs. Patterson lived for now, the small interventions, the quiet observations, the willingness to see what others might overlook. She kept Emily's painting on her wall, kept the card in her desk drawer where she could reread it on difficult days. They were reminders of why this work mattered, why paying attention was so crucial, why one adult's awareness could literally save a child's life. Sometimes former students would come back to visit, now in high school or college. They'd tell Mrs. Patterson stories about their lives, their successes, their struggles. And sometimes in those conversations, they'd mention something she'd done, something she'd noticed, something she'd said, some small moment of care that had stayed with them for years. Mrs. Patterson never remembered all of these moments. They'd been ordinary to her, just part of being a good teacher. But to the children, they'd been extraordinary. They'd been proof that someone was paying attention, that someone cared, that they mattered. Emily came back to visit in 7th grade. She was thriving, good grades, good friends, involved in school activities. She joined the peer counseling program, helping other students who were struggling. The experience of being noticed, of being helped, had shaped her in profound ways. "I tell people about you all the time," Emily said over hot chocolate in the school cafeteria after classes had ended for the day. "About how you saved my life, about how you saw me when I was trying to be invisible." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "You weren't trying to be invisible. You were trying to survive. There's a difference. I know that now, but back then I thought if I was just quiet enough, if I didn't bother anyone, the pain would go away on its own. A lot of kids think that. That's why I want to help them. I want to be the person who notices, like you did." And there it was, the ripple effect. One child saved, now wanting to save others. One moment of awareness, expanding into a lifetime of compassion. Mrs. Patterson thought about all the children she'd taught over the years, all the moments she'd noticed something wrong, all the times she'd acted on instinct rather than waiting for certainty. She thought about the children she'd helped and, more painfully, about the ones she might have missed in her earlier years before she'd learned to truly see. The work was never finished. Every new school year brought new children with new needs, new pain hiding behind brave smiles, new reasons to stay vigilant. It was exhausting. It was heartbreaking. And it was the most important thing she'd ever done. If you've stayed with us this far through Emily's story, we want to thank you. Stories like this matter because they remind us that children depend on adults to notice, to care, to act. If this video moved you, if it made you think differently about the children in your life, Please take a moment to like this video and share it. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that matter. Drop a comment below telling us what you think about Emily's story, or share a time when someone noticed you when you needed it most. These conversations matter. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to hear them. Mrs. Patterson retired after 30 years of teaching. At her retirement party, there was a surprise guest. Emily, now in high school, confident and bright, studying to become a doctor. She stood in front of the assembled teachers, parents, and students and told her story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one, about pain and fear and a blue dress she'd clutched like a lifeline, about a teacher who'd refused to look away. "Mrs. Patterson saved my life," Emily said, her voice steady and strong. "Not just because she got me medical help, but because she taught me that my pain mattered, that I mattered, that asking for help wasn't weakness but courage. She saw me when I was trying to disappear, and that made all the difference." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, as Mrs. Patterson packed up her classroom for the last time, taking down posters and sorting through years of accumulated materials, she found Emily's painting. Being seen, she wrapped it carefully, knowing it would hang in her home office, a permanent reminder of why she'd spent 3 decades in this exhausting, heartbreaking, essential profession. The final truth was simple. Children communicate through behavior when words fail them. They show their pain in careful movements, in clutched dresses, in withdrawal from joy. And it takes adults who are willing to see, willing to trust their instincts, willing to act even when it's uncomfortable, to save them. One adult paying attention can change everything. Can save a life, can teach a child that they matter, that their pain is valid, that help is possible. Mrs. Patterson had been that adult for Emily, and Emily would be that adult for someone else someday. And so the ripple would continue, spreading out in ways that could never be fully measured, but were infinitely precious. That was the legacy. Not awards or recognition, but children who survived because someone noticed. Children who learned they mattered because someone cared enough to see past the silence, to the suffering underneath. As Mrs. Patterson locked her classroom door for the last time, she thought about all the Emilys out there, the children hiding pain, convinced they have to suffer in silence. She hoped there were teachers watching them, noticing them, trusting their instincts. She hoped those teachers would remember that sometimes saving a life looks like asking one more question, watching one more minute, trusting that nagging feeling that something isn't right. Because that's all it takes. Just one adult who refuses to look away. Just one adult who sees.